This is the torture and abuse story of Italia Mendez, a Mexican human rights activist. She had traveled to San Salvador and Chico in the state of Mexico on May 3, 2006, to document abuses by police against demonstrators involved in a protest. She never thought she would be arrested and tortured herself. At 6 a.m. on May 4th, police brutally knocked down the door of the house she was in, pulled her by her hair, and pushed her against a wall and beat her. During the violent interrogation by the police about her doings in Antico, Italia explained she was a human rights activist, and in response the officer in charge told the others she needs special treatment. They struck my head with a piece of wood, covered my face with a jumper, and took me inside a police bus. Once in there I could smell blood and hear screams of pain. There were people piled all over the floor, and the police made me walk on top of them. As I reached what felt like the end of the bus, they pushed me down and started beating me again, trying to suffocate me, and then they raped me. I could not believe what was happening. As they were abusing me, they forced me to make sexual comments to them and said they were going to kill me, Italia described in her account of that day. The beatings got so bad that at one point I felt a hand lifting beneath me and heard someone saying, "Please stop beating her." The journey lasted several hours until they eventually arrived at the state prison. Covered in bruises and cuts, Italia was taken to the prison's dining room, where 47 other women who had been held in connection to the protests were waiting to learn their fate. Italia was desperate to speak to a doctor and a lawyer to show them her injuries and ensure they would be properly documented. But when an official from the state public prosecutor's office arrived, he refused to register her complaint about the abuse. No proper medical examination was carried out. The doctor who examined me kept laughing during the checkup. He stitched up my head without any anesthesia. It was very painful. Italia was released on bail 10 days later and charged with attacks on public roads and means of transport. These charges have now been dropped. Since then, Italia and 10 other women survivors of the police repression that May 4th have denounced the abuse they suffered while in custody to the authorities at the highest level. The 8-year struggle for justice has seen 2 police officers facing charges for the sexual torture, but the many others involved, including senior officials, continue to evade justice. Their cases before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Recently, Italia and the other 10 women have come together with other survivors of sexual torture committed by authorities in different cases across the country to demand justice and an end to such grave abuses in the nationwide campaign called Breaking the Silence. Italia says her ordeal illustrates the widespread use of torture and the lack of justice in Mexico. This torture and abuse story is about Huma, an Afghan woman who was forced into a childhood marriage when she was 14. Her family arranged her marriage and a formal engagement took place. Her fiancé, Safallah, often visited her after the engagement. One day he arrived with blood all over his clothes. He proceeded to take Huma to his home, even though a wedding had not yet taken place. Huma and her mother were screaming, but he just dragged her off by force. He kept her there for 2 months, during which time he raped and tortured her. Eventually a wedding took place. Over the years he tortured Huma in unimaginable ways. He hung her by her hair and stuck hot pokers in her body. He broke her legs and ripped out her fingernails. During this time the only happiness Huma knew was when she had 2 sons. Her love for her sons carried through this dark time. After one violent incident, Safallah's family took Huma to the hospital. She was discharged back to her own family's home. Safallah's brothers came there and asked her to return. They promised to take care of her and promised that they wouldn't let Allah repeat the terrible violence. Allah also promised to begin a new life with her. Huma trusted them and went with them again. She soon realized she had made a terrible mistake because nothing had changed. Allah started beating her immediately. He told her, "Your mother and sister should come here right now, otherwise I will kill you." Helplessly, Huma informed her mother, and she came with her younger sister. Allah beat all 3 women within inches of their lives. Her mother and sister escaped, leaving Huma to fend for herself. Allah was so furious about Huma's mother and sister's escape that he beat Huma to the point that she lost an eyelid, and he bit her arms. Her sister-in-law told her that Allah was planning to kill her and that he and his brother had dug a grave for her body somewhere. Huma decided that she couldn't take it anymore. She knew of an organization which was helping widows. She decided to risk her life and have a chance of safety and freedom by telling her husband a lie. She said that her mother would be at the widows' organization waiting for her. Huma asked him to take her there. Allah took her to the organization. Upon arrival, he received a phone call. He said he had an urgent work and had to leave. He instructed her to return home with her mother and sister. As soon as he left, the staff of the widows' organization asked Huma if she would like to be taken to the police station. They immediately sensed her extreme danger and saw the abuse that had been piled on her. She eagerly accepted. The chief of the 6th Police District took Huma to the hospital. Her injuries required that she stay for 45 days. Hospital staff understood that she needed to be discharged to a safe location, and she was taken to the Women for Afghan Women shelter. It took almost 2 years for lawyers to get Huma a divorce because Saifullah wouldn't show up in court. He continued to make endless threats against Huma's family, especially her mother. Like her daughter, she had to flee and leave the village and hide in Kabul. Huma now lives in Kabul with her mother and is trying to rebuild their lives. The last torture and abuse story I will be talking about is about Nazi, an Afghanistan 16-year-old girl. Doctors at a hospital in Kuwait, capital of Zabul province in southern Afghanistan, are treating a brutally tortured woman whose husband cut off both her ears and nose, broke her teeth, and shaved her head only 3 months after their marriage. The victim, 16-year-old Nazi, is also suffering from psychiatric distress due to her experience, according to a doctor in Kuwait hospital. From her bed in Kuwait hospital, Nazi told IRIN her story. My family wedded me to Mumtaz, a 40-year-old man, some 3 months ago in Pakistan. Soon after our marriage, we moved to his house in Kuwait, where his relatives told me he had another wife who had died a year ago. In Kuwait, my husband was jobless and was always complaining about economic problems. 2 weeks after we moved to our new home, he beat me for no obvious reason. One day I asked him to let me go to a party at my in-laws. He agreed and said I should return home in the afternoon. That day, although I came home early, I found him very angry. He beat me again, worse than the first time, and warned that he would kill me if I stepped outside the home again. He also told his brother and nephews not to come to our house in his absence. Day after day, Mumtaz's suspicion increased. He was thinking other men were visiting me while he was not at home. He did not listen to my pleas and was always saying that all women are bad and unfaithful to men. During this time, he often beat me with a stick. One night he hit me so much that I fainted. When I regained consciousness, I found my head had been shaved. I cried so much, but he did not care. 1 week later he knocked me down, bound my hands, and then broke my teeth with a stone. He also poured boiling water on my feet. After this I could not walk and was in a lot of pain, but he said I was only pretending. No one was coming to our house, so I could not tell anyone about my situation. I had nowhere else to go either. My family lives in Pakistan. One night I could not cook dinner for him because I could not stand on my feet. He got so upset when he found out that there was nothing for him to eat, he started beating me. Again he bound my hands with a piece of cloth. I felt a terrible pain in my left ear, and then blood was flowing down my face. I thought he wanted to kill me, so I started screaming. Then I felt a similar pain in my right ear and more blood. I tasted a mixture of blood and tears in my mouth while my voice was fading. I felt the worst pain in my life only a few seconds later when my husband used his knife to cut off my nose. I fainted.